up to what would be aggressive and probably a bigger cut than the company is comfortable with. And so come up with a range of options to model. And so that is the next step, is to project the P&L impact of these potential action plans. So you define 1 to 3 scenarios ranging from conservative to aggressive, perform the P&L calculations to determine the annual impact as best you can. And obviously we won't spend a lot of time going into this, but the idea is you've got the products down the left-hand side that you are prepared to discontinue. What's the annual volume? What's the gross profit? What's the annual gross profit loss potential? And then let's plug in what are the substitute products that we think we might be able to sell in. To what % do we think will be successful at replacing that volume with a substitute? What's the gross profit on that product? And how much gross profit are we going to gain back or offset against that loss? And then efficiency gains. We really don't have time to get into it, but some of my clients have done a nice job of being able to quantify what the benefits are of having a more streamlined product line, and I've done some work in that area as well. So to the extent that you're comfortable quantifying the efficiency gains, it's very important to plug that in. And then it's really just the pluses and minuses going across to model what the net P&L impact will be. And there's no doubt that, you know, this is going to cost some volume and probably some margin. But by quantifying it this way, you can make that not such a scary proposition to understand what that is and get people comfortable with what's the right decision. And again, I just think this is a very important step because it prevents second guessing and finger pointing down the road. And you know, someone asked a question earlier about what about those people who are blockers and are you know, going to try and get in the way of this. Taking this step helps offset that and prevent the second guessing. And then finally, make the decision, communicate, and implement. So you finalize that action plan, you know, and it doesn't have to be pick one. It ends up usually being some sort of a hybrid between, you know, the various scenarios that you put together. And then you, once you've decided what products you're going to make a move on, you determine the finished goods and raw material inventories and run out dates. And again, we've got a template to do that. Obviously, ideally, you run out of product and you don't end up with obsolete inventory once you cut these. If it's a product that's got a unique packaging material or a film or a label or a unique ingredient, ideally you can be smart enough to run these out in a way that you use up most of those raw material inventories as well. And in order to do that, you develop a timetable for discontinued products. So it's not going out to the marketplace and saying we're dropping 72 products effective next month. It's a matter of saying here's 72 products that are going to be discontinued, you know, over the next several weeks or months. And here's the anticipated run-out date. And you know, we'll continue to work with you, and customer service will communicate with you when the inventories are getting down to the point where it's going to be going away altogether. And then again, you communicate this very clearly to sales, the internal departments, and your customers. So to summarize, the first step is identifying the candidates. And again, making it clear to sales and marketing that you're not attacking the entire product line. You're bringing a set of products to the table, which the cross-functional team is going to talk about and work together to make the best decisions on. And then it's evaluating those products, looking at the list of candidates, discussing and understanding why they're on the list, developing the proposed action plans. So again, as you can picture, as you're going through this process, the person leading the team is putting check boxes out here to the right on the proposed action plans, and that then feeds into projecting the P&L impact of the action plans. And not to get ahead of myself, but the vision for software that we're looking at, this would all be done electronically such that as you populate the proposed action plans out on the right-hand side of this, it starts building that P&L model for you. And then once the decision is made, finalize the action plan, determine the finished goods and raw material inventories and run-out dates, develop the timetable, and communicate, communicate, communicate. Let's pause here for a minute and see if any other questions have come in before we put a capper on this.
We do have have a few more questions. One of them is, doesn't discontinuation of a SKU give the competition the opportunity to increase shelf space?
Yeah, and again, shelf space is an interesting term. Sounds like it came from a retail person. I would substitute in the food service channel opportunity for the competition to grab a slot at the distributor. Yes, it does. You know, and frankly, I'm a food service guy. You know, the retail mentality of maintaining your shelf space isn't something I'm born with, I guess. But the analogy in food service would be maintaining those slots in the distributor. And this is where it comes back to being smart about what you can substitute. You know, if holding shelf space trumps the benefits that you can get internally by eliminating a product, then I guess, you know, that would be the kind of a discussion that would take place between marketing and operations, and the decision might be that's a product we've got to tolerate, you know, for strategic reasons. I guess, frankly, holding a slot on a shelf or a slot at a distributor, to me, is in itself not a compelling enough reason to hold on to a product that is costing you financially.
We have another question that might go hand in hand with that. I have seen seemingly poor performing products hang around because they are in place and necessary to cover plant overhead. Have you been confronted with that question, and how is it resolved?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, and I unfortunately don't have an easy answer to that one. It's why it's usually a good idea to take a look on a variable contribution margin basis, as well as just looking at volume and gross profit for all the products. So if you've done your accounting for overheads well, and that in itself is a huge challenge for most people, you'll at least get a look at products that are covering a lot of overhead. And again, even though they might look bad on a volume and gross profit basis, that would be a plausible reason to decide to keep those products around.
Okay. We have another question from a member of our audience. Have you seen an increase in service levels by planned SKU rationalization? I
have. I absolutely have. Really, the first time several years ago that I took a company through this process, they were really up against it in the plant. And it was definitely driven by the complexity of the product line and just a lot of very low volume, underperforming products that cause a lot of complexity. And I don't have hard and fast numbers, but they definitely felt that service levels improved and that in fact their bottom line had improved as a result of this.
Okay.
You know, and just to be fair, it's hard to point to the cause and effect relationship very precisely. And as we talked about, that's one of the reasons these things are so challenging. It's hard to say we're cutting products because of these 17 SKUs, and it's hard to say our service level went up 2% because you cut those SKUs. So, you know, I think it's more a gut feel, instinctive kind of relationship than it is, you know, being able to draw the direct link between two dots. But again, that's why it's so important to get everybody sitting down in the same room and talking about these issues in a structured manner, as opposed to these one-off ad hoc emergency meetings, which go, you know, kind of nowhere.
We have another question that's kind of lengthy, so let me read it all. Do you recommend an activity-based cost